Hello and welcome to another Friday Facebook Live. Thank you very much for joining us. So today we're steering a little bit away from the business theme, which is what we've been talking about mostly for the past few sessions. If you've been watching, we've been talking about legal implications of lockdown and financial implications of lockdown. And whilst all of that is really, really important, there's also another aspect that we need to think about, and that's the people implication of lockdown. So we thought, given that restrictions are starting to be eased, that we would do one about surviving COVID and lockdown with the most vulnerable people in society. So a lot of people are either vulnerable themselves and they've been shielding for the past however many weeks, or they're looking after somebody who's vulnerable. That might be that you've got somebody in your own household who's vulnerable, or you've got somebody living on their own who's vulnerable and you've been having to kind of look after them, you know, take food, do shopping, all that kind of pick up prescriptions, all that sort of stuff for the vulnerable. So lots of people in lots of different situations, and the last few months have essentially been very tricky. But the government recently announced that from the 6th of July, those who have been shielding are going to be allowed out to see certain members of the family in their bubbles, whatever bubbles means. And then from the 1st of August, they're allowed to supposedly go back to work, providing that the workplace is safe for them, which is obviously a massive caveat. So anyway, those are just a few things. The situation for the vulnerable is obviously on the verge of changing. And we thought we'd probably just best have a bit of a chat about it. So I've got two amazing women with me here today. So first of all, Joanne, what's your name and where'd you come from?
My name's Joanne Grant. I live in Sunbury upon Thames, which is down south in Surrey, but I'm originally from Leicester, and it's lovely to be here.
Oh, I didn't realise you were all the way down in Surrey.
Yes, I am.
So have you got pouring down rain, or have you got quite sunshine today?
It's showers and sunshine.
Right, all right, we're on the edge of the East Lancashire moors, and it is absolutely pissing it down. Thank you, Joanne. Becky, what's your name? Where'd you come from?
My name is Becky Stanley, and I come from Chorley.
Chorley. So the reason we asked Becky and Joanne to join us today is because they've both got different personal experiences of either being vulnerable or looking after or taking care of people who are vulnerable. So Becky, I'll come to you first. What's your personal situation? Why are you here, and why are you vulnerable?
I have cystic fibrosis, which means I'm very vulnerable to everybody around at the moment. But on a day-to-day basis, if somebody's got a cold or just a bit of an infection, that also makes me vulnerable. So in a time like this, it is very difficult to know who you can trust and who you can't.
And you've been in lockdown for quite a long time. Your employers were quite good, actually, weren't they, at the beginning? They put you into lockdown straight away, didn't they?
Yeah, so like before it was actually broadcasted that people do need to shield, my work thankfully set me up with like a work laptop and told me to work from home as much as I could, so that there weren't any risk within the office, which was good of them.
And so how have you been over the last, we will kind of come back to surviving, but how have you been over the last, how many weeks have you been now in? 16, did you say?
15, 16, yeah.
Long time.
Right, actually, surprisingly.
Yeah.
I expected to lose my marbles at some point, but marbles are intact at the moment.
Well, that's what you think.
Well, yeah.
Nobody's asked Craig who you live with. Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Becky. And Joanne, what about you? What's your personal circumstances?
So I am a volunteer in my local community through our church, St Mary's of Sunbury upon Thames. When it at the beginning, before lockdown, when everything was, I don't know about you guys, but it just felt so intense. We were building up, we're watching everything that was happening in Italy, and we thought, well, you know, things are going to get bad, people. And I just had this overwhelming sense of there's going to be so many people that are going to have to stay indoors and they need help. And the safest way and the most effective way I thought about offering help, I don't know if you've ever felt like this, you feel like you have to do everything yourself. And I was just sort of going, I remember just being in the kitchen here going, I've just got to do something. What can I do? And I was seeing people were like giving their phone numbers out on public forums. I was like, that's not very sensible. So I thought, who's safe, who's good? And we've got a very good church here in Sunbury. So I actually contacted Father Andrew, the vicar here, and he was like, actually, we're in the process of setting up a special volunteer group. So I was like, yeah, sign me up. And that's how it began all those many weeks ago now.
Fab. So what have you been doing? Delivering food parcels and what else?
Yeah, so it was prescription pickups, shopping, phone calls. I had to take a lady's cat to the vet because she couldn't take the cat herself. And to start with, it was sort of like a drip, drip, drip of a few people, and then it grew and it grew. And what has actually happened, I've ended up with a group of sort of my regulars who I shop for them every week. And so I'll have a point of contact with them at least once a week. I'll talk with them on the phone. I'll drop some stuff off. I'll still do odd ad hoc things, but I think a lot of the volunteers on the group have done a similar thing. Rather than them have to come back to the church every time and ask for help, it just felt like a natural thing to do. My first call was, well, I'll just be your person now. I'm your point of contact. So that's how it was to start with.
It's crucial that though, isn't it? Because you think like so I'm a seroptimist. I've managed to squeeze the seroptimist into, I think, to every session I've done so far. So if you haven't Googled the seroptimist by now, go and Google them after this, obviously. But the seroptimists are a local group. They're a women's organisation, and we help each other out as much as we possibly can. We raise money for charity and stuff. So we have been doing some various charitable funds to try and help certain vulnerable groups, and I'll talk about that more in a minute, hopefully. But a couple of our seroptimists had to go into shielding themselves, and up until the point that lockdown started, they were really independent people, you know, all working, had jobs, you know, lived on their own, living proper, you know, like proper lives, like real life people. And all of a sudden they were sent home and told to stay indoors. And I know for one of them, she asked me if I would go and pick some prescriptions up for her, which I was more than happy to do because I would go in there anyway for myself. But she said afterwards how much she hated having to ask for help because she's never been in that position where she's had to ask anybody to help her. She's always been an independent woman. And that's the crucial thing, isn't it? You know, you take it, if you have to keep going to your local church every week to say, please, could somebody help me? Please, could somebody help me? That makes you feel vulnerable. That makes you feel like you're a disadvantaged person. So just being able to recognize that and set up a system and say, no, do you know what? You obviously are going to need help for X number of weeks. We'll just do it. I think it's a good way of doing it, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think I mean, you hit the nail right on the head about the independence there. I just really felt for these, like the basic thing, like when we all went into lockdown and we really were only allowed, you know, those of us who were allowed out to supermarkets, essential things, like your food becomes really important and it becomes something you look forward to. And suddenly to even have that choice taken away from you, that you can't go around and select what you want to eat. And and have that independence taken away, it felt so important. I felt just to at least be able to help someone with that. So it was always very, tell me exactly what you want and I will try my hardest to get exactly what you want. Don't just say, oh, any old bread will do. No, tell me what you like, because it's one of the few pleasures that you're getting at the moment. There's not a lot else to be done. So please let me give you as much of your independence by providing the food that you want to eat. I found that was important as well.
It is, you're right. It's choice, isn't it? It's choice. It's a basic human right that we all think we have. We can go to the shop and choose what we want. So it is important. Becky, I know you've had quite a few friends dropping in with food parcels and stuff, haven't you? Have they just been bringing you treats? How have you been working with that?
Yeah, I've had a few treats dropped off to me. At the start, my mum was doing my food shop and everything. But it's like it was said, you do enjoy going to like the supermarkets and the stuff because you like to see what you can buy. Because it's like you're saying, you eat with your eyes first, don't you? Then after a few weeks, you just feel like you're getting the same old like rubbish, and then you're like, oh well, this ain't fun anymore. Like, so.
You did. I mean, we managed to get a Sainsbury's shop because I've got a bad back, and so we had 4 people in our house 5 people at one point, trying to do a food shop for a week for 4 people, 2 of whom are very hungry teenagers. You know, we needed a lot of food and a lot of drink as well. And trying to carry all of that was really hurting my back. And I wasn't allowed to take my husband in to do the heavy lifting because you only have one person from each household. So anyway, I managed to get a Sainsbury's delivery shop. But the thing with that is that you then just end up clicking, because life's too short to do online shopping. You just end up clicking the same thing every time. So for the last few weeks, we've just had this bloody stuff delivered, which I'm not, you know, really I shouldn't moan about. I'm really grateful that somebody brings food to our doors. But yeah, there's those things of treats. They just go out the window, don't they? Or something as a surprise, something that you think, oh, I fancy a donut. I like a custom donut. You don't get it. That's the hard bit, isn't it?
When you go shopping as well, you like going up and down the aisles, don't you, to see what there is. But like when you are doing your online shopping, it is just, it'll come up with your regular items and you're like, okay, then I'll get it.
Exactly. Yeah, because it's easy and
someone who's shopping for other people, this probably won't help you feel any better about it, Becky. But I've noticed, so my usual shopper choice is Sainsbury's. But we've got a very big Tesco's up here, and that seems to be the preferred shop. And again, I want to give people what they're used to. So I've been to Tesco's a lot. I've had to get used to it. But because it's a new supermarket with different products and I'm dealing with other people's shopping lists, every now and then my husband will be like, why have we got pork pies in the fridge? We don't usually buy pork pies, except for on treats. I'm like, well, I was getting them for one of my chaps and I just thought I'll get some for us. So I keep coming back with random things. I mean, my husband loves it because they're usually naughty things. But I'm getting influenced by the people that I'm shopping for, but also trying other foods. And that in itself actually leads to some nice conversations. And I do try and have those conversations about the food. You know, one of my chaps likes to really chat through his list. And while we're talking, they go, oh, actually, I do fancy that. I was like, well, I can get you that.
Yeah.
To try and give that joy and that variety to the food. Because otherwise, like you say, you just go bread, milk, it's the same old.
Yeah, exactly. The same old things time in, time out. Yeah. So just thinking then about, you know, the vulnerable people in society and then the people that we've been kind of considering it. We've talked about, you know, the lack of choice and the lack of freedom. What other challenges do you think people have been facing that maybe we didn't think about at the beginning of lockdown? Is there anything, Joanne, that you can think of with your people you've been looking after?
Well, it's just going to make me sound incredibly ignorant, but I'd never really thought really about, you know, people that really need to shield and like how vulnerable they are all the time. Like, you know, Becky, you were saying you have to be careful if someone's got a cold. Yeah. And I just felt really naive to it. And I remember one of my first people that I went to who said, I'm on the shield list. I suddenly was like, ooh, I'm not a trained professional. You know, it suddenly made me feel like, oh, goodness, a huge weight of responsibility. And it just sort of made me think, you know, our society is not set up full stop to help with so many people who are in a vulnerable position all the time. You know, that's sort of it. It made me stop and really think about that. And has changed my perspective as well, because also when you think about vulnerable or the shielding, you very often you make an assumption perhaps that they're, you know, elderly and maybe not used to having, you know, they're dependent on other people anyway, but you know that isn't the case. You know, as we can see from Becky here, you're on the shield list. You're a young independent woman who's used to doing what she wants, and it just sort of made me think society's not set up in general to be a safe place.
It's really not. I mean, it's again, we've talked a lot about privilege over the last few weeks, you know, from various sides. But my dad had a stroke probably about 10, 11 years ago now, maybe even a bit longer. And he now is in a wheelchair. And so he's been in a wheelchair since he had this stroke, obviously. But it wasn't until that point that I suddenly had to deal with the world from the point of view of somebody in a wheelchair that you realise how it is just not set. Or even if there's a ramp, into a shop, then there'll be a step down or a step up or something. You think, well, you've put one thing in place, but nobody's thought about it. And you suddenly, I remember when my dad had his stroke, and he's obsessed with the Olympics. So we got him tickets to the London Olympics, and we went down to the Olympics with my dad in a wheelchair, my son in a pushchair, and my niece she was a newborn, so she was in a proper pram. And trying to navigate London with a wheelchair, a buggy, and a pram, honestly, it was like it was awful. But again, it's that position of privilege. It's only when we're confronted with these things that we realise, actually, these are things that, why have we never thought about this before? It's bizarre. So, Becky, from your point of view, what have you found to be most difficult to deal with, or most restrictive?
I'd say the most difficult part is the emotional side to the whole shielding. So, like, even though measurements have been put into place where they are protecting the most vulnerable, it's then you have to watch everybody else still carry on with life before, like, the lockdown was happening. So, like, for me, I had to still carry on watching my friends enjoy themselves. So before it all, your friends was like, you trusted them, and then they became into people like that you couldn't no longer trust at the moment. But while they were all still like mingling with each other and having fun, you then just have to sit there and be like, oh, well, I wish I could join in, or I wish I could go to that and come to the plan. So that is a big downfall.
A massive thing that you've said there about not trusting your friends, and it's not because you can't trust them because they might lie to you. It's because you don't know where they've been. They could be carrying, and this is the thing about COVID as well. We could be carrying it and not know. There are some people who are just healthy carriers, and so you can't. You don't know where anybody's been. You don't know what they've touched. Like you said, all of a sudden these are the people that you love, but you're thinking like, don't come. You can't come near me. You can't trust you because I don't know where you've been. It's again, it's like what's the word? It erodes, doesn't it? Erodes something like that connection with the rest of the world, where you have to seal yourself off. It's not normal, is it? Not normal human behaviour.
No, we're not adapt to this.
No, not at all. Have you found it got worse as the weeks have gone on? Like, has loneliness been a thing for you, or have you got more used to it, I think?
I'd say over the few weeks I've overcome the loneliness. At the start it was harder than it is now, because now it's just like it is becoming everyday life where you get up and you just potter around the house, and what you can do in the house is your entertainment. And after a while you kind of like start ignoring like your social media, what your friends are saying and everything. It doesn't go in the same as it did in the first 2-3 weeks where you was jealous and like envious of them and stuff. So it has got better with time, but you still sit there and you think, oh well, I want to go to the pub this weekend when they all open, but the time will come.
Yes, it will. And do you know what, though? I found myself I've got really institutionalized. I think I would be really good in prison, because I think I would really quickly get used to it. Because Hannah texted me, my sister texted me the other day, and she was like, can you just nip up to the office to pick up this document? I was like, no, you want me to get in a car and leave the house? No. I'm like, no, I can't do that. And I was instantly like, no, I can't. And I think this is the thing for me now. I'm like, I've got used to being here in my little bubble, and I can talk to my friends on Zoom or, on Facebook Lives or whatever. And I just think it's a bit weird. What about you, Joanne? Have you got used to it? I mean, you've been going out quite frequently, haven't you?
Well, to the shops, well, to the supermarket only. It's kind of weird. I mean, I was in a different situation anyway. I've been at home quite a lot by myself. Well, my husband's been out to work. I live with my husband and my 2 cats. But I was used to being home based, so I'm self-employed. But but not by choice to start with. I was made redundant from my long-term position last July, and I've taken some time to myself to sort it all out. So in some really weird way, lockdown gave me perspective, it gave me purpose, and it gave me momentum. And like I said, one of the first things I did was the volunteer. I wanted to volunteer, because it's like everything came crashing together. It's like, I'm useless, I don't have a job, I just, you know, I haven't got any kids to look after, I've got 2 cats who are quite needy and a husband. But I was like, I've got time, I can do something. So in a really screwed up way somehow, like it gave me that momentum to finally do some volunteer work, which I'd been thinking about doing, and it gave me purpose. And it gave me purpose and a reason in the community. I was like, I'm giving back. So in some ways, I'd kind of been a bit institutionalized at home, and it made me go out more.
Yeah, so you've had the opposite experience.
Yeah. In some ways.
It's interesting though, because you know, that thing of, I think a lot of people, when lockdown first occurred, they went into, well, I was going to say a lockdown mentality, but duh. But, you know, everybody was like, right, we just need to protect our little bubble and come into it. And I don't think the consequences on the most vulnerable in society had occurred to people. You know, like, for example, with the Suicide, we support the local women's refuge. And within about 2 weeks of lockdown, they put a desperate call out saying, you know, our demand is already higher than ever. We are in desperate need of clothing and toiletries and shampoo, you know, just basics. Normally we help them with like luxury things that are a bit of a treat, but they were like, we just need toothpaste and toothbrushes. You know, women are turning up with nothing in the middle of the night, please. And I think that's the thing, we were very slow, and I think the government as well was slow to realise the effect on that it would have on the most vulnerable people. And I think it's great that communities kind of, or you at least in your church, obviously saw that straight away and swung into action. Do you think in your community, have you seen a lot of that, Joanne?
I mean, I think I'm not so sure. I mean, I know about the volunteer group that I work in, and the only way I can perhaps give a balance to it is I also joined the NHS call out for volunteers that they did. And I've not had a single call since I joined it. And I mean, they only will select you in your local area, and you can see so it's an app, and you can see all the other volunteers in your area. I swear there's more volunteers than the people who need help.
Yeah, I think that, didn't they have something like 650?
Yeah, they needed 250,000, and it was like 3 times the amount. But I also wonder, at that point, the local voluntary work here had already covered off most things, because it took so while to get that up and running. So it makes me wonder whether, I hope we're doing a good job, but it also always have this niggling sense of there's going to be people out there who won't know, because if you don't know where to go to, like, you might just be sat in your home, like. And a lot of people that I help don't have regular access to the internet. So I worry that there's a lot of people who've been missed.
Yeah, Becky, so I want to ask you really, you see, the thing is, one of my theories is that there were a lot of support things set up. So for example, like Age Concern UK and, you know, charities like that provided things like sit-in services for the elderly, shopping services, taxi services for the elderly. You know, there's a lot of things set up to help combat loneliness and to help the elderly people kind of function in society. Because we've never needed it before, there isn't the same thing set up for young people. So has anybody reached out to you? Have you used any services? Has there been anything at all on your radar that would have helped you?
For entertainment wise, no. But for stuff like food and stuff, there's the food packages that you get on a weekly basis. But other than that, that's about it, really.
Who do those food packages come from? Are they central government, or is that a charity thing?
Yeah, it's from the government.
Right, okay.
So that's all there is, really, in helping, well, what involves younger people.
I know the Cystic Fibrosis Trust have been quite active on social media in terms of providing information for people with cystic fibrosis. Yeah. Have you heard of anything like they've reached out to people, phone service, anything like that?
No, I've not received anything, and I've not heard anything. So no.
I do generally worry about the young, and I suppose in a way, younger people are more likely to have a support network. And, you know, I mean, people who are still working will have colleagues, you know, people have still got their mums or dads around, or brothers or sisters who are, you know, so I suppose they've got more of a network that's going to help them. But I do think it's curious. I wonder if the services that have been set up have mostly been aimed at the older people. Who have yours been, Joanne? Are your customers mostly sort of elderly people, or have you got a good mix?
Mainly elderly. One of the ladies who's shielding is younger. But yeah, on the whole, it's, you know, tends to be elderly. And I do wonder, I mean, like, can I ask you, Becky, if you had seen, like, before you went into lockdown, or even saw on a website or a local thing, you know, call this number, you know, if you need any help, would you even have thought to say, yeah, that's for me?
Well, there is for instance, they've just done a thing in Chorley where it's like, it's promotes like young people to go like a community centre.
Oh yeah, the Enquire.
Yeah. Every time I've ever gone past it, there's nobody ever in it. So even though it is there for younger people, I don't think they're exactly advertising it enough for people to know to go and when to go and what they're going for. So even though there are things, there aren't any knowledge of it really.
It is a good point, though, isn't it? Because you are, again, if you're younger, you're more like, you know, you're going to go to social media, I suppose, aren't you? You've already got your friends who are your support network. Yeah. That's who you're more likely to turn to. You know, I would, if I needed something, if I was feeling stressed or worried or needed something, I know I would phone my family or my friends. I wouldn't think like, oh, I'll phone a helpline and ask somebody else to do it, because I would think there's going to be somebody more vulnerable than me. You know, if I was a vulnerable person, there would be somebody more vulnerable than me that would need that, and I've got a support network that can help me. So I suppose it's that, really, isn't it? Maybe that. Okay, so we've talked about kind of the challenges that the vulnerable people. Just one thing I want to cover: how do you both feel about the word vulnerable? Like, Becky, do you like being called a vulnerable person?
I know I'm vulnerable when it comes to my health, but like as a person in general, I know I'm the complete opposite. So yeah, it's a bit 50-50 with the word, because it's like, when is a person using that to describe you? Like, in what sentence are they going to use it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really troublesome. I understand why we use the word vulnerable, because they have a vulnerability. But if somebody called me, I would never think of myself as vulnerable. What do you think?
Yeah, it's strange. It does conjure up frail, for me, in the context, was frail elderly individuals that are vulnerable. You know, the people you see on the Help the Aged adverts near Christmas that makes you bawl your eyes out. So yeah, well, it does its job in that way. We've been using vulnerable and shielding in sort of as the same term, which they're not. So, you know, people who actually need to shield will have had the letters, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but you have a letter from your doctor, you would have gone into lockdown sooner, and you're very much in contact with a healthcare provider about your shielding status. Whereas vulnerable, I've seen throughout this, as they're the individuals who are usually over 70 and have and do or do not have a severe health condition that will affect them. So it's funny, isn't it? Because yeah, it's all about the word and what it conjures up. So I suppose in my head, I've equated vulnerable with the elderly and shielding with shielding.
Yeah. I keep thinking in my head I could probably use the word shielding more than the word vulnerable, because shielding is who we're talking about, and vulnerable, really, it makes you think of, you know, old people on Zimmer frames, doesn't it, or at risk of falling over. But yeah, okay. So in terms of, obviously, as I said at the beginning, from the 6th of July, people who are shielding are allowed to start going out into their bubbles, which I've clearly misunderstood what bubbles means. And then from the 1st of August, you're allowed to start going back to work. So, Becky, from a personal point of view, how do you feel about that? Are you ready to go back into the world, or are you still really worried about other people?
I'm ready in a way to say that I'm getting bored now, so I'm ready to go out and like finally experience something in 2020. But other than that, in regards to work and stuff, I'm not confident enough to go because it's like you don't trust anybody that you're around. So being in an office that's compact with people, it's just, it doesn't feel safe.
I think that's the key thing, isn't it? I mean, I was reading the press release from Reuters before, and it said that people who had been shielded are allowed to go back to work from the 1st of August, provided sufficient measures have been taken in the workplace. Well, then, how do we judge what sufficient measures are? That's the key thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, what are you going to do? Sit there in a hazmat suit or something? And
yeah, because if people are shielding as well, their safety is different to people that aren't shielding safety. So how can you match both them people and make it sufficient enough for each individual?
Yeah, it is. There's so many things. So, Joanne, have you had this conversation with any of your people that you've been helping at all?
Yeah, I have done. And I think for everyone is, you know, different weeks, people feel differently. But yes, I mean, I'm fearful for the shielding going out. Just like it does. I worry for my people because we've all, you know, the non-shielding folk have moved on, and I'm sorry, but there are good examples of social distancing, but there's a lot of poor examples. So back to our society's not set up for this, you know, everyone's just like, yeah, I'm fine, you know, we're allowed to be a metre apart and all that. And I'm thinking of these individuals going out, going, well, there's nothing to, you know, unless you are wearing a hazmat suit, you know, what is to say, like, you need to be particularly, you know, careful around me because I am a shielded individual. It makes me nervous. And I know that the individuals that I help out, they too are, you know, worried about it, but they've also said, well, what life am I going to have? You know, the alternative is waiting till there's a vaccine, and you know that's not going to, it just can't logistically be by August the 1st or whatever. It's not going to be. So it's the weighing up quality of life. But also as an individual who is privileged and doesn't have a health condition that's meant I've had to shield, this is something, and Becky, you've said, you know, you have to live with your whole life anyway. You must, I don't know, is it always there at the back of your mind, that person sneezed, that person's coughed anyway, that you have a different awareness? It never really occurred to me how scary the world can be if you have a health condition like this. It just must be, scary.
It is though, because I mean, you've had periods, Becky, where you've been really quite poorly. You've had periods where you've been hospitalised because your lung function's gone down. You've had periods where you've been on IVs and, you know, antibiotics and stuff. And at those points, you know, you have had to be really careful and in a way shielded. You know, there's been times when we haven't been able to go out. You were supposed to be coming out for tea with us, or you were supposed to be coming around to our house, and you haven't been able to do it because you've been on IV. So, you know, it is something you've lived with. I suppose that doesn't make it any more fun, does it?
Not after 15 weeks anyway.
No. I mean, it's an absolutely valid point though, isn't it? I was listening to a podcast before, and they were talking about the reopening of schools, which is going to happen from September. And they were saying on the news last night on the Downing Street briefing that it's going to be compulsory that all children will need to be in school from the 1st of September, no exclusions. And they made that very clear on the news. And I think, again, well, that, you know, that's fine. I know children probably aren't going to get very ill from it, probably aren't going to die, but children are disease sponges and they just carry germs around. And so you think, if you've spent 3 or 4 months shielding and then you've sent your child to school, you might not have gone out, you might still be staying in, you might be working from home, you might be doing everything you're told to do, but your child is then coming back and bringing all those diseases back into your home. You know, it just seems... I genuinely feel for people who are in this position, it must feel quite powerless. I don't know, Becky, have you felt that the decisions are being made without you and you just kind of have to go along with it.
Yeah, it's been frustrating because it is things such as you want to go and do your food shop because I'm old enough and I have my own house to go and do my own food shop, but I'm relying on people to do it for me. And it's like, I feel like I've gone from someone who's grown up and gone like milestones in the life to, okay, I'm just now under a different shelter, living under the rules that I had when I was at home, where you can go out, you can't go out.
Yeah. Yeah, I know your mum's been having kittens as well, hasn't she? Because she's normally the one who imposes those rules on whether or not you go out, and now all out of her control as well, isn't it? Are you worried, Becky, about, because I know you and Craig, your boyfriend, have been furloughed for the last few months you've been in the house together. Are you worried about if he's made to go back to work, that he might bring something back to you?
Well, he's at work now.
Oh, is it?
I think he's been back now. I think this is his 3rd week. And at the start, I was like, yes, finally, he's out of the house. I don't want to watch his PlayStation. But then after like the 2nd day, I was like, well, I'm on my own and I've got no one to talk to. And it's like 9 hours of just doing nothing. And then when he was coming home, I was just like, who have you spoke to? And like, have you been near anybody? Have you been in a group today? I'd be like, get in the shower, clean yourself.
Yeah. You know what? I was talking to somebody else whose wife is a intensive care nurse, and they were saying she's basically, been having to get stripped off at the door, straight in the shower, clothing straight in the wash. It is that, again, it's that you can be as careful as you like, but what is the rest of the world doing?
Yeah, because it could be like the domino effect, for instance. So he could bring something and then people around would just also tumble over.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Joanne, I don't know, I presume when you've been going and visiting your shielding people that you've been keeping your distance, keeping your, your mask on, keeping your gloves on, all the rest of that stuff. If you're carrying on, I presume you'll just carry on, even if they're allowed to go out. Are you going to carry on providing that service with that level of kit on?
I will continue it as long as they need me, basically. Yeah. And none of them are keen to be dashing out to the shops and doing their thing. So yeah, I'll keep with my gloves. I mean, don't get me too started on supermarkets and etiquette, but I've got my gloves on, I've got my mask on. I'm really trying to keep my distance in a time where people don't seem to be doing it so much, because I have a responsibility to those individuals, because there's hardly anything coming into their house that I'm not bringing them, you know? And that is a massive responsibility. So, it's the gloves come off when I've done the shopping, a fresh pair of gloves goes on when I drop everything off. I'm so careful. And I found out yesterday, one of the ladies that's shielding, she's got a cold. And I was like,
yeah.
Spoke to the doctor, and I was like, well, and she's like, I must have got it from the postman. Because through the post maybe, because she's not been out. She has not been out, but she does have a cat. So they did say it's quite possible someone's like, nice kitty, stroke, stroke, stroke. Yeah. And now, dear God, are you going to have to keep your cat in? All these things you don't think about. But at the same time, I was like, when did I last see her? When did I last bring her some, stuff? It's that sort of responsibility. So yeah, I'll absolutely, as long as they need it, I will remain as germ-free as possible.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, though. I hadn't thought about it, and I was watching something, and they were saying, oh, yeah, no, we wipe all the posts when it arrives. I thought, God, I would never, like Leon, my son, he's been ordering all sorts of bloody stuff from Amazon. So we've had umpteen parcels coming here. And again, it's those little things you don't think about. Of course, that's where germs are going to come in. We've got 4 cats, we've got a dog. I'm out doing the horses. If somebody's sneezed and then touched the gate when I go out to do the horses, then, again, it comes back to that. You think, or I thought, I had created this safe little bubble and my family were in the house and they were safe and we weren't going out. Everybody was all right. But there's still so many ways that those dirty germs can come in. It was interesting as well. I went down to the town centre to bake up, I think last weekend, and Leon and I we needed to go to the chemist and we needed to go to the shop. So he hadn't been out the house at all, or he'd been in the car but not out the car for the full 3 months, because you're not allowed in shops, you know, only one person in a shop and stuff. So I was like, right, you know, things are easing, come with me. Like, we put our masks on, we had our gloves on and stuff, we had our sanitizer ready, and we were the only people in Bake-Up that were wearing masks, and it was like it had just gone out the window. The shops were, you know, nothing wrong with the businesses, not criticising the businesses at all. They'd done everything that they were required to do. There were stations when you went in, there was markings on the floor to make you stand 2 meters apart. You know, you could wipe your trolley when you got into Morrison's and stuff. But the people just didn't seem to pay any attention to it. And I do genuinely think there seems to be a belief at the moment that COVID is over, that we've done that bit, you know, what's next? I don't know, have you two found that? Becky, have you found that from any of your friends? Are they fully thinking it's over and everybody can go out now?
I don't think many of them really understood the severity of it in the first place. Like, there was friends that were still meeting up and going drinking, having parties, but then I looked at it as well and thought, well, you do have a different mindset to how I would have. So even though I was just like, you're stupid, you're wrong, there was also like, but I'm jealous, and if I didn't have an illness, I probably would be like, well, it's only one night, so.
Isn't it? It's really easy to look at it from because I know you put a post on Facebook, I think, when we were only at like a couple of weeks in, and you were quite cross with people saying, like, you are being selfish, you are putting people like me at risk. But you're right, you know, if the shoe was on the other foot, I don't know, if I was 19, 20, 21, I probably would, you know, I thought I was invincible at that age. I probably would have been like, oh, well, we're all going to die anyway, I'm going clubbing. Why would you not?
Exactly.
Well, so Joanne, what do you think, you know, just generally, not necessarily even around the people you look after, but just generally, do you feel people are thinking that it's over?
There's definitely more of a sense of that. I mean, yeah, and I had a bit of a meltdown after one of my Tesco shops because of that. It's just when they just loosened it a bit, and it's like the floodgates had opened and everyone had just decided they'd had enough. Yeah. And I was so frustrated. And I was really genuinely upset because I just wanted to scream. I mean, I was muttering lots of interesting words beneath my mask, but I was just like, "Oh, what is wrong with you?" I was like, "If you don't care about yourself, that's your business. But I care about the people I'm looking after." Yeah. And I swear, I would not have been quite so if I hadn't taken on this volunteer work and got to understand what shielding really means. I don't think I would have been as half as, you know, I'm really quite militant about it. It's really affected me because you're responsible for other people. But I mean, I think I said at the beginning, I'm originally from Leicester, and as you know, Leicester's gone into lockdown again. Yeah. And most of my family are just outside of the lockdown zone, but it won't be the last, I'm sure.
No, it's of course. Well, I mean, for one thing, somebody put a post up saying, like, well, at least the virus knows that it's not allowed to cross the Leicester border now. You know, at least we know now we've got the lockdown perimeter. The virus knows it's got to stay within it, and it is that mentality, isn't it? Like, of course, it's going to be everywhere. We're probably going to be in and out of these periods, and then, you know, even if we avoid a national lockdown imminently. They're saying when the normal flu season comes around again in kind of October, November time, we're going to be straight back into it again, because that's when all the germs come out. And of course, that time's when all the kids are back at school and, you know, everything's been spread around. So yeah, I do. I've seen it a lot recently. People thinking like lockdown's over, lockdown's easing. That means the virus must have gone. And when you look at history as well, though, when you look at what happened with like the Spanish flu epidemic in 1919, wasn't it? They had the first peak that killed several 100,000 people. They all came out of lockdown. They were still walking around wearing masks. They were still taking very similar precautions to us. But the second peak killed like 2.5 million people. And you just think, why is nobody paying attention to this? That's why I'm staying here in my little fortress. The Jews absolutely can't come in on the cats. I'm quite safe. So we've kind of talked about our personal things. So in terms of businesses reopening and people trying to get there. I can see this from both sides, because I can see if you're a business owner and you're an employer, at this point, you've got to build your business back up, and that's it. You know, if everybody wants a job, we've got to build the business back in. We need people in now. But from an employee point of view, why are you going to go and sit in an office if you're not sure that it's safe? So what do you think people have got to think about, Joanne? I don't know, you know, do you think there are anything that businesses need to do or think about or pay attention to in these coming weeks?
Well, I mean, they've got a lot of guidelines that they should absolutely be adhering to, but I think it's ensuring that they're enforced, that it's not the guidelines, it's the problem, it's the people and whether they follow them. Yeah. And that's the biggest thing. You know, the supermarkets, sorry, that's about all I talk about, because it's like my life at the moment. It's the only place I go. But you know, it's one thing putting all these things in place, like you were saying, but if people don't follow it, then and it's not enforced, then you might as well not bother. So when it comes to businesses, whether it's, you know, the entertainment business or whether it's offices, don't just see it as a checkbox exercise. You know, HR, done your job, yeah, all these workstations 2 meters apart. It needs to be kept on top of, and people's behaviour needs to be called out, and individuals need to be made responsible. You know, you can't have this, oh, well, I'm not bothered. It's like, well, tough, you might not be bothered, but, you know, someone else cares about their life. Thank you very much. So I think it's enforcing of the boundaries and things that are put in place.
I was speaking to a friend of mine who does health and safety, what's the word, like monitoring and make sure it's enforced in workplaces and stuff like that. And she was telling us about a factory that's one of her clients, and they had bought all of their staff masks. So they had masks. They had bought gloves, so they got all of that in place. They'd put the markers on the floor. You know, they'd done everything that they needed to do. The manager, the shift manager, who was in charge of however many people that day, the masks were getting steamed up when they were trying to work. So he said, "Oh, just put holes in it." So they'd all poked holes in their masks, and then the gloves weren't fitting properly. They weren't gripping. Sorry, so they couldn't do what they did. So he went out and bought a load of marigolds, washing up gloves instead, because they have the grip on. So they were essentially working in mask, without masks and with marigold gloves on. They had a coronavirus outbreak, and 80+% of the staff are now off with coronavirus. And you just think, like, it's exactly there, isn't it? You know, the guidelines are there. The top office obviously provided what they needed and done all that. But then there's that individual stupidity. You just think, for fuck's sake, what is wrong with you all? So, Becky, I know you mentioned before about going back to work. What do you think that your employers would need to do or show or prove to you sorry, my cat is trying to get, for you to feel safe going back to work? What would make you feel safe and ready to go?
I honestly do not know, because in our office, it's like all the desks are together, so like the office is very confined itself. So I personally don't think that they could separate desks for like people to be at one desk at a time, because there's just not enough room for it. So I honestly have not a clue what they could or would do to make it.
But you could work from home though, couldn't you, really? I mean, you did work from home before you were furloughed, didn't you?
Yeah, definitely. I hope they do extend.
Yeah, I think realistically, employers are, you know, obviously if you've got a factory, if you've got something where you need people on the premises, that's a different matter. But for a lot of businesses, I mean, ours, for example, we can quite easily work from home. We have been doing for the last 3 months. So I do think that's going to have, businesses are going to have to really consider that for the majority of staff. If they can work from home, they're going to have to let them, aren't they? It's the only way forward. I'm conscious that we're coming up to time, and so what I would just quickly like to say, we've gone through most of the things that I wanted to talk about, but have either of you found, if people are really worried about you know, the shielding, coming out of the shielding, anything like that, have either of you found any resources, books, charities, websites, anything that you've used or found or talked to that have helped? Have you got anything? Where people go to help worried?
Sorry, it broke up a bit then.
Oh, sorry. Right. I'll come to Becky first. Where have you found help through or with or from anybody, or where would you send people if they needed help?
I personally haven't really found anything. Like, I've had the odd post off the CF Wood that we follow on Facebook. They set out a few pointers and tips of what people can do. But other than that, I've not seen anything to like.
I think the cystic, I mean, I don't, obviously I haven't seen much, and I think I've seen the stuff from the Cystic Fibrosis Trust because you and your mum have shared it. But they have, from a charity point of view, I think they have been quite good, haven't they, at providing information at least to people of what they should be doing. Yeah,
because they've also like given advice on while you are shielding. There's like meals that you can make to keep up with your diet and everything. So they have like offered things like that. But
that's good. So I suppose if most people had a condition or an illness or something, then there's normally a charity for it, isn't there? So help from that, really. So Joanne, what about you? Where would you send people if they were needing help or advice?
Well, I think it's listening to their healthcare professionals first and foremost. So there was a bit of when it was announced, I spoke to one of my ladies, says, "Oh yeah, apparently you can head out into the workplace from August the 1st. So says Boris. How do you feel about that?" She says, "I'm going to listen to my hospital. Thank you." What they have to say. But you know, there is a question about the wider implications. I think I actually got this phrase from my mother-in-law. Like, we all know what FOMO is. But she was talking about FOGO, so fear of going out. It was a new one for me. Yeah. And I genuinely think that is going to be in all age groups, and shielding or not is going to be a big issue. So I haven't got any particular resources, but I think that's something we all need to be wary of and aware of.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. One of my seroptimist friends, we had a Zoom meeting the other night, and she was saying that, you know, Boris has said she could go out from wherever. She said, but she speaks consultant, and her consultant had said, you know, over his dead body. So you're absolutely right. You don't need to just do what the newspapers or the government tells you to do. You know, listen to your doctor or listen to yourself. If you're not comfortable with it, if you don't feel safe, if you don't think other people are taking the precautions that they should be taking to keep you safe, like Becky was talking about before, it's back to that, you know, you don't trust your friends anymore. You don't trust the general public to be doing what they should. So if you don't want to, don't, you know. And I think the thing is, from a kind of employer point of view, you need to be having those conversations with your employers. If you are not happy to be going back to work, if you are not feeling like they've taken the measures necessary to keep you safe, then you need to be able to have that open and honest conversation with them and say, I do not feel safe coming here. I'm not risking it. You know, what compromise can we reach? I want to work, but how can we work it? So I think people need to have the confidence to start those conversations, definitely.
And also, just to add to that, it's not just the workplace, sorry, it's getting to the workplace. It's getting to the workplace, because your workplace might be like doing its right thing, but if you're having to get on a train and a tube and a bus because it's the only way you can get to work, you know, I'm hoping that workplaces will make allowances for that too, because public transport, I mean, living here, when I worked in central London, and the thought of doing that journey into work every day, even as a non-shielding person, I'd be like, no, do not feel comfortable. So there's wider things to think about, not just the workplace, but the transport system and how individuals get to work.
It's absolutely a crucial point. I mean, the thought, you know, a bus or like you say, the tube at the moment would fill me with dread. I mean, they're so, you know, I go down to London fairly frequently and get the train. So, you know, it's 3 hours on a train. But when I get off that train, I am so dirty. Like, my clothes are dirty, my boots and my face is dirty, my hands are dirty, and that's just dirt. So imagine the germs. I just don't even want to think about it. But and that's when there isn't a pandemic going on. So yeah, absolutely. You just think, you know, I've been doing sort of counting my blessings a lot recently, and we live fairly in the middle of nowhere, so we are really lucky about that. But I do think if you're in central London and your only means of getting out, even going out to the shop in central London, I think would terrify me at the moment. So yeah, it's a very valid point. It is. Okay, so we have covered everything that I want to talk about, and we're coming up to time now. So just as our sort of final conclusion, I always say, what would you piece of advice be to people at the moment? So Joanne, I'm going to come to you first. If you were to give somebody one piece of advice at the moment, what would it be?
Be respectful of other people and their space, wear a mask, and, you know, there's still a pandemic out there, so behave like there's one. Be respectful.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think, yeah, it's just not all about you, basically, isn't it? Yeah. Becky, what would your piece of advice be?
Don't be so ignorant about everybody around you, because even though your situation is different, it doesn't mean that they will not suffer in a different way.
I think that's one of the things that surprised me a lot about this is people's lack of empathy, and people having that mentality of, well, I'm all right. Well, I don't have an underlying health condition. You know, I'm not. I mean, we, for example, you know, Leon's 10. We're in our late 30s, but we're fit and healthy, and we were like, right, well, we're probably, you know, even if we get it, we're probably going to be all right. But we're still shielded, because it's up to us to help the people who aren't all right in society. Yeah. That's our responsibility. So we've still, you know, we're not growing up. We're doing all these measures to help other people, not to help ourselves. But yeah, mind boggles. But anyway, mine would be listen to your gut. As I said before, you know, it's everybody's own responsibility to keep yourself and your family safe, and you have to do that in the way that you feel is best. And if you don't want to go out into the world or go to an event or feel that the workplace is safe or send your child to school or whatever, you have to do what is right for your family. So listen to your gut and do what you best. So finally, thank you so much to both of you. Thank you to Joanne. Thank you to Becky. I've really enjoyed that session. I hope you two have. Feel free, anybody, to put your comments in the comment section underneath this video. If either of you would like to put your details in there as well, and then people can get hold of you if they have any questions they would like to ask you, then feel free to do that. Otherwise, share it far and wide. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll be back next Friday.